Indeed,
Yeah,
standards. This week, today, we are entering into the standard creation exercise, right, in the training.
yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
perfect that, you know, them receiving these thoughts around standards after that training can enrich their process.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think so for me, um, all of what we're sharing is ultimately based on um, active experimentation and play, trusting and also experiencing at some point that there is no judgment, there is no right or wrong in these circles, even with the very sort of profound and challenging questions that some of the brothers ask, either out of their own experience, where they had to deal, or there was someone present who either got lost in his own story to a certain extent, or seemed to be coming with a stronger energy than others. It's ultimately the like I shared before, the perfection of it all, and the huge level of mildness around this. There is no right. It cannot be wrong. It's all part of a learning journey. There is always a moment to come back to something that just transpired. As long
Yeah.
as I come from me, it's always an invitation to really also deep dive into what is happening to me, whether I'm a participant, a facilitator, leader, or a witness to the process of others.
Yeah.
Um, and that process also continues after the circle and between circles. So there may always be a moment where I touch base again and say, wow, what happened there? I realize that that did a lot to my safety, or it did something to me.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
So yeah,
You know,
standards. It's also an invitation to experiment and play with it, with upholding it. I noticed for myself that I have been experimenting with standards, with co-creating them, but also with bringing them in the space, and then actively sort of having the intention for me to play with it a bit more, or be sharper on it this time, and then see, okay, what is it? What happens when I actively ask a brother about that and say, brother, I lost you, or brother, um, sorry, something, I don't know, something is stirring in me right now that doesn't sit well, the way you speak. I can be completely, that can be completely my process.
yeah.
So be it. So it is also trusting that, trusting the safety of the circle by showing up fully, including in my own learning journey and my own vulnerability, in my not knowing, in my bumping my head, in my, yeah, and also allowing myself to be surprised
Yeah.
and try. Yeah, it's the field of not knowing, in a way. Um, allowing myself there also
Yeah.
when calling out a brother in the way I am able to do at that moment.
Wow.
I hope.
Oh, it's you touched on the emotion in a very profound, the emotion of, creating and holding standards in a way that resonates very profoundly with me, Harman. You know, you use words like trusting, allowing, witnessing, etc. For me, energetically, and that has been one of the glues for me with you and Barry. Having a shared space where there is so much trusting, allowing, witnessing, etc. And that might sound to many people as being passive. No, I mean, I consider that to be such profound standards, very active, profound standards of togetherness. Trusting that each of us are in our own perfect process, and allowing that space, even if it is somebody being on the surface or taking a little too much time, etc. It is that man's process. And eventually, as that person continues to grow by watching you embody different set of standards, it'll all a symphony starts emerging in that brotherhood. So I love some of these standards you shared. It just makes for an easy, joyful space together. you know just being there, witnessing somebody else's journey and allowing the space for him to do his healing or growth. The other bit that you shared that resonates very profoundly for me is about the idea of standards. That is, on the one hand, I've noticed so many sacred brotherhoods, the real connection in the brotherhood happened in the process of co-creating standards. And often it can be a long process. I know brotherhoods that have taken like 3, 4, 5 sittings to eventually consolidate their standards. And I know in today's training, we will also, after the breakout, we'll also lay out some of the example standards that we've compiled over the years. But the co-creation process of a brotherhood that's just come together newly and starting the co-creation of their standards, that is such a bonding experience. And the simple recognition, our standards are living beings. They're not static. They're not an experiment in the beginning of creating a sacred brotherhood and we have our list of standards and then we just, okay, it's done. No, it is something that gets visited every time when we gather as a circle after our recentering and our inner and outer clearing and all of that. Then reaffirming that standards list and perhaps sometimes even revisiting that standards list to say like, hey, you know what? Last week, a new standard came up for me that I feel I'd like to present to this brotherhood to see if everyone concurs or agrees with it or not, to check to see if this is a worthy standard for our brotherhood. It's a living being, that it's evolving with time. Some of the standards that were important at the beginning might not be in the top 6 anymore after 6 months. So maybe a new set of standards are emerging. Treating these standards as living beings is extremely vital to the sacredness of the brotherhood. So this is one of the other thoughts that you triggered on how to go about the co-creation and the maintenance of the standards. Oh.
Yeah, 2 words from the questions that I want to pick up on, or 1 word from the questions and 1 other thought, and that has to do indeed with when someone sort of finds himself at some point sort of distance from the group in whatever way. What I also have experienced a lot is the sort of the self-correction that happens in a mature space, especially when brothers around the fire remain silent, listen, it also allows men to see, oh, I've sort of drifted away. You're still there. And on many occasions, brothers come back themselves, really come back themselves. And I've also, and that's an addition on the standards, what you say, the process of agreeing on the standards, or at least agreeing to abide by the standards every time again, also allows brothers that feel they cannot uphold the standards for that particular evening or that particular meeting to say, you know what, I'm not in that place right now. To be really honest, I feel I cannot. I'm in whatever place. And that also allows men to say, I withdraw myself for this council. So the deliberate process of going through the standards also allows for that, and that actually increases safety, because it's a demonstration of self-leadership when you know that I'm actually right now not the safest person for this group. I cannot uphold the standards, and there is nothing, brothers, for this moment that I need from you or that you can do for me in order for me to be here. So I, with respect to the standards, I withdraw. And that ties into, for me, one of the most profound personal breakthroughs has been around safety. That and there is a question on that, how to create safety in the group. And my personal breakthrough has been that instead of waiting for safety to be there for me to fully show up, so that there is always something that needs to be there before I show up, I've come to see that actually I create safety by fully showing up. The more I show myself, the safer it becomes for me and for the other brothers. The less I show up, the more I remain dependent or dependent on safety provided by others, or perceived safety or assumed safety. And actually, it brings me to the point that it's never safe enough. So I've come to see that I'm actually the measurement of my own safety. And it's been a journey, of course. This is not something that came overnight, but it does. There is only a certain point of safety that I can provide for others by being me, and the rest really is part of that brother's process. So if for a brother, for whatever reason, it is not easily very safe, then I cannot make it safe for him, but showing up fully. That's really the only thing I can do. And I can contribute by building a safe container with safe standards. And if it's then still not safe enough for someone, that is beyond me, really. It's beyond me. And I can offer my support, and ultimately it's the journey of the brother. And there is a limit to, and I'm not saying those words with, as if it's loving. It's coming from a place of love and full respect and honoring and actually deep empathy of the place where that brother is. And I can only do what I can do, and mostly that is showing up fully and being an invitation.
Beautiful. Indeed, it's safety is such a subjective thing. What you shared resonates with me, Harmen. And also, in the more established brotherhoods, I see there is a great standard around transparency of needs. There would be a certain moment, like I recently was in a brotherhood, where because of the COVID situation, a brother who is working in the healthcare sector was being pressurized by the authorities to take a vaccination. And he, because of his belief system, he did not want, and he already had the COVID and all of that. So he had some reasons like, hey, I already had the COVID, I'm not a fan of vaccinations, etc. I shouldn't be forced against my will. And this brother came into the circle, and there was a best practice there that after the check-ins, the first 4 steps that we always do, that is, setting the space. Number 2, doing the inner clearing, outer clearing, all of that. Number 3, affirmation of the standards to create the space. And number 4, the check-ins. And after the check-in, this brother took the stick and he said, like, what? Today, please allow me to ask you to offer me some safety, because I feel very vulnerable and lost. So that act, and it's a very established brotherhood, so there's that level of depth and openness because they've been together for a few months or more. It's an established brotherhood where he felt very comfortable to take the stick and just ask, like, today I need your help. Please offer me safety. He asked that. And the way the other brothers responded was magnificent, was amazing, was heart-opening. One of the other brothers took the stick and asked, like, can you let me know, in what way I can make you feel safe? How can I contribute to your need for safety? In what ways? And it opened up a conversation. And that conversation itself was so profoundly healing for so many. The next 25-30 minutes, they just went deep into their own experience of safety and lack of safety. And all of that started by asking these 2 questions to each other. Like, can you help me feel safe? That was the first question. And the second one that responded to another brother was, what do I do? Or how can I create that space for you? Or my conduct that can help you feel safe, what would it be? And it opened up that conversation around safety, and it turned out to be perhaps one of the most safest 2 hours for some of the men ever in their lives, in their adult lives.
Wow.
So I'm reminded of that, of how that can be, the safety issue can be openly brought up. And on the matter of sometimes some men retreating, and there's also a question around, equitability or equality of presence for everyone with the stick. Yes, sometimes some men, I notice, are comfortable in their silence. But on some occasions, I notice some men retreat because some of the other men who are in a very intense place, they bear with me for the judgmental word, they hijack the space for themselves. And then some of the other men who also feel like, wanting to be listened to, they kind of take a back seat against their own will, not because they're enjoying the silence with themselves, but simply because they're not finding the space. And as a custodian of the standards, as an elder, sometimes when I notice this inequality, what I do is I would just take a round of passing the stick in the clockwise direction with a clear invitation that when the stick comes to you, if there is nothing you want to share, you are content in your silence, simply just pass on the stick to your left. You don't have to share anything. If you're in a beautiful silent place by yourself, pass it on. That's it. Just pass on the stick and continue in your silence. But if you're somebody who feels in incoherence inside because they want to be listened to, yet they're not finding the space for it, then when the stick comes to you, it's yours. So once in a while, once or twice along the 2 hours or so, just doing one clockwise round of the stick. Just make sure that those who are absent against their will are getting a space. So that's another best practice that I've noticed that creates, to the question around equality and fair allocation of time.
Sure.
Oh,
Oh, beautiful. It's like at moments putting in the thermometer into the group to check the temperature, to check how everyone is doing, whether they're still present, whether something on their liver, their heart. And I've definitely also seen that part of the self-realization for men joining a circle is actually finding their voice, finding the safety, finding the inner confidence, finding the trust, finding their to speak up. For some, that is perhaps even the most breakthrough element in their self-leadership journey, joining your circle. And like Barry said before, meet them where they are. You don't know where they are. So my breakthrough or my comfort zone is probably very different than Sujith's, than Barry's, than all the other men. So I don't know. But I've seen indeed that giving a voice to men actively with the check-in, making sure that everyone at least gets the opportunity to say one or two words on how they are.
yeah.
Being aware that we men, we humans grow by role modeling. So you may have men joining who have never had a role model. And one of their first experiences that some men in your circle speak so openly and they're like, wow, taken aback. And it doesn't even have to mean that that person who may have been in a circle for so long that he feels very comfortable with sharing about his inner feelings, whatever. But for some, that's completely new, and it's almost overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. So it doesn't even mean that that person is more egoistic or a leader. It can simply be the mere fact that this brother has been on a journey for longer, being like an overwhelming something. And as a facilitator, you don't know what the temperature sometimes is, especially when there's new men, random men joining your circle. So giving them a voice is indeed, Sujith, I love it. And if not for, if nothing's being shared in the center with that round, because they're still comfortable just sitting, listening, having an inner journey of recognition of I'm not alone, of whatever insights they have, then again at the checkout part, there's again the possibility to at least ask how it was for them, and sometimes I actively invite that one brother that hasn't spoken to share, like you just did with Barry when I was talking and Barry also wanted to say something. Then you actively ask Barry what he wanted to share. So that is also the liberty you have to trust your intuition as a facilitator to at least give the invitation.
Yeah, exactly. With no also being a perfect answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I have another about 10 minutes before I jump into another call. And I'm looking at two things here.
Yeah.
Um,
Too.
in the managing the energy of the circle, there are a couple of questions around dealing with low energy and dealing with intense emotions of someone and conflicts between participants. Um, you know, the one around dealing with conflicts between participants, it is something so frequent and so subjective. And, you know, I know there are many schools of thoughts around how to address it in an active way, etc. Coming from the more allowing, witnessing tradition that I come from, Harmen, whenever I sense there is some kind of a tension or conflict between participants, I don't take it upon myself to directly confront anyone with it. But what I do sometimes is, when I see it is getting into the collective process, it is impacting or affecting the collective process, sometimes I would just ask into the space, completely unrelated to any conflict going on, not as a reaction to something happening there, but occasionally I would just put an invitation out into the space, not to any person in general, but as just as my loud reflection. That is, if there if any one of us, we are experiencing some feelings triggered by another brother, how do you feel um, you would best like to explore it or address it? How would you best like to explore it or address it? And people start talking about their own comfort zones. And what ends up happening, some people would say, like, what, I would like, I prefer better to catch that person alone, one on one, and have a frank conversation. Or I would like just to find a time where both of us can sit together with the presence of a third brother. Or others who would say, like, I'd like to bring it into an open space like that so that all of us can have lessons from it. The best part is, all these answers are right answers. And we don't have to agree as a group on one preferred way. What ends up happening is, when a conversation like that happens, those brothers who are feeling interpersonal tension, they will have some ideas. Oh, you know what? I would like to catch the other brother and find a time with Sujith alone, three of us. And the best part is, whatever feels, they will connect with each other. They will find a way that works for them. Sometimes it is just privately talking to each other, whatever it is. But a conversation like that is an implicit invitation for people to take charge of their triggers and heal them, perhaps alone, perhaps together with the trigger man, perhaps with the bigger group or with a third man, whatever it is. The passive tradition that I come from, I generally don't confront anybody. Hey, you know what? I'm sensing a little tension here between you and you. Is that something that you would like to bring into the space? I know many of my North American friends do that. I don't. I don't want to put anybody under the spotlight without their own wish. They can take the stick and bring themselves to the spotlight if they want. Why should I ask them for that? But an open conversation around what works for each one of us, it becomes an implicit invitation for those brothers to undertake their healing. So that is something that's coming up for me that I've adopted as a best practice. Whenever I sense a conflict between two participants, two brothers. Oh, wondering what's coming up for you, Harman.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Also, the way you go about that. I think this is indeed these questions, conflict, deep emotions, sometimes also being triggered self as a facilitator. That is the indeed a field where everyone finds or is sort of discovering his own way. Um, and for me, this also ties into the short exchange we had on needs. So this can be a moment. It's usually one person who at least starts to, I don't know, sort of starts to demonstrate that something is going on, either deep emotions or in
Yeah.
relationship to someone in the circle or someone who with has just shared. And in the circles that Barry and I created, we adopted the one of the four insights of Don Ruiz from Costa Rica, one of the Native American elders, and one of his standards is do not take anything personal.
Amen.
So we take some time before the circle to deepen that. Do not take anything personal and see everything as an invitation, as a sort of a mirror of to look at what's really going on. So this whole notion of we are all we are just different versions of each other is really rooted in the circles. So there is a link to standards that we can always make. And the second one is really an active question about, brother, I hear what do you need? Or sometimes the question, what is really happening here? And that can be a question to a person. It can also be a question to the collective at that moment. So taking a moment to, like you said, take some deep breaths, look into the fire, and sort of have that reflective question on what is truly happening here. And
Wow.
perhaps also asking, like what you said, and is there anything that anyone in this circle wants to share, giving it the possibility of for everyone to sort of express either a feeling or something that's being touched, and then this what seems to be for the person in the conflict it's me it becomes a generic conversation again, and it becomes a possibility for that brother also to look
Yeah.
at himself or whatever happened through the eyes of others who sat there, who felt something. So that I've experienced that as a very powerful way,
Beautiful.
bringing it to the collective. What is truly happening here? Who wants to share? And in fact,
Yeah.
making the bridge then to what if I am triggered? Um, and this I believe is is a sort of a leadership journey, becoming aware that I'm triggered, and again also daring to and I deliberately use the word daring, having the courage, because this may be a growth edge for you to be able to to share that
Yeah.
I feel touched, I feel triggered, I notice that I'm not
Yes.
fully present anymore. And yeah,
Yes.
that's the moment where you may become the participant, and the other brothers become the space holders for you in order to have your moment of looking at yourself with what's truly being touched. And again, I found those moments to
Yes.
sometimes be profound and transformational, not only for myself but
Yes.
also for the brothers around me.
Yes.
Oh,
I love the word you chose, Harman. Growth edge. our triggers are growth edges. Absolutely. There's something waiting to be healed there. And being triggered in a sacred brotherhood is the a great blessing. Because if I am triggered in a sacred brotherhood, the discovering the trigger, the root cause of that trigger becomes so easy because it is happening in a very controlled space, that it's the way this man talks triggered me. And it's so easy to draw a connection between my trigger and my trauma. So indeed, I love the suggestion to just own up that trigger in that moment. It creates a huge growth edge. And I also remember something you shared from Don Rui. It's a very self-responsibility is one of my top 5 standards. That means I always take responsible for my inner reality, and I assign responsibility for other people's reality on them. It's their pain speaking. And practicing that is a powerful way of being the mountain, that standard. So, resonates very profoundly what you shared around, owning that trigger in that moment, and also the idea of practicing not to take things personally. It's a response to that question, how to deal with being triggered. And building on one thought you shared, like earlier when we were referring to the interpersonal conflicts, you said sometimes just creating a break and taking a breath and gazing into the fire. Here there is a question: how to deal with low energy? And as a custodian of the standards, I'm always mindful, even when there are 100 men in a circle in the festival. I'm mindful of the overall energy of the space. If I'm in a sacred brotherhood and I notice somebody disconnect or yawn or the low energy happen, whatever it is, I immediately call for a break, a disruption. And not somebody is talking and I immediately stop talking. No, the moment that person surrenders the stick, I'm like, what, guys, how about can I invite you all to join me on my feet? And then, ringa pakia, do a little haka or Shiva Tandava or some fire breathing. Or if we brought our musical instruments and immediately guys, brothers, just to shift our energy, shall we just pull up our tom-toms for 5 minutes? Just a haka or a tandava or a fire breathing or getting the drums out, and it'll turn into a great experience of all of us starting to dance very soon and forget the low energy. God, everyone is so widely awake and having fun. So these are very, very simple, straightforward interventions, but it instantly shifts the energy. And of course, anybody can bring their own practices. It could be just, tapping each other's backs, or, starting tapping your chest and abdomen, or starting to sing together or create some music. There are 1,000 things. The important bottom line for me is when I notice low energy, I instantly disrupt the orbit of the proceedings. Aho.
Yeah, and this again, I love that. And again, this is also a place for an invitation. So my low energy can also be with me. So then I acknowledge it and bring it in as something for me. I can express then perhaps a need for some physical movement and invite men who have a practice to bring that practice. So I as a leader do not have to do it all alone. I can simply be the observer or the sort of the taking note of what is happening and then opening up the space. And in my circles and also in our circles, taking care of self is one of the is a very important standard as well. So it's also an active invitation for all men to
Yeah.
speak up when they say, I need a break, or can we do an exercise? Can we shift the energy? Can we stand up? So
Exactly.
taking care of self is also one of those standards that is inviting, but also an incentive for men to stay, awake in a way, at least observing where they are, also energetically, and do something about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not always up to Sujith, Barry, Harmen, or whoever to do it. We can,
Wow.
we can
Yes.
always do it,
Exactly.
and it's a
Exactly.
space for all of us to lead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
beautiful.
Beautiful reminder. Beautiful reminder. And looking at the time, me having to jump into another call, I'm receiving all these ping messages.
Yeah, where are you?
Is this a good moment to? Yeah, exactly. Is this a good moment to just check out for now?
Yeah, I only see one remaining question about homosexuality or homosexual men. That's the only topic we have not addressed, but and I don't know if there is a short answer to that or not, or some shed of wisdom from your side as a checkout. But then we've covered them all, I think.
Yeah. I can give you my 30 seconds bit on that one, if you like, Harman. About welcoming homosexual men. You know, where I come from, we don't recognize two genders, we recognize seven genders. That is our tradition. And when we talk about sacred brotherhoods, we refer to males, those who recognize themselves to be males. And still, there is so much fluidity in there. I've even had situations in my life where, some women ask me, can I join? Because I really want to understand what this is all about. And I ask the brothers, if these women have permission to join. So I've had women even join and being zen about it. They come, they join, they spend one circle together, and they're like, wow, how amazing, this is beautiful, love it, what great work you guys are doing, etc. And they disappear. That's it. I've had men with all kind of sexual orientations and transgenders join because they feel male. And that is it. If the entire group says yes, that is one of the preconditions. We explored that in the class. If all men feel, yeah, sure, he's homosexual, transgender, whatever he feels, male, welcome. And what happens is we continue with our recipe. We continue with our practices, our deep conversations, whatever it is. You know, Sometimes a homosexual man after one or two sessions feel like, you know what? I feel I connect more with my inner feminine here and not so much with the energy. Thank you for having me here. I would have a transgender who would just continue forever or maybe drop out later. I would have heterosexual men, as you all know, as Harmen, you also know, who will drop out after a while. And I'm like, zen about it. Anybody who feels male want to try out being here, and the other brothers are happy with inviting a new brother, not because this is a transgender male or a homosexual male, because no, it's a new participant. And every time there's a new participant, the others seeking permission from others is a valuable practice. So if everyone says yes, I just invite them, and after a while they decide for themselves if they connect with the masculine part of their energy in this space or not. The choice is theirs. Aho.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for me, every brother is a brother. So I make absolutely no distinction also. And I like the thread that you pose on women who feel more men or transgender. For me, they're all welcome. What I have not necessarily seen a lot of homosexual men joining. Perhaps that's for their own reason. I don't. So, but for me, every brother who shows up is my brother. Even if it's indeed a transgender brother. And so I've had them, and I have not acted any differently, welcoming them from the same place and allowing the same process for every man to interrelate to the circle, and whether that's their place and what they want to bring into it and what they want to learn in the circle, remembering the self-realization part of it. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So that, for me, there is, every brother is a brother.
Amen.
Oh,
Every brother a brother, and that is also something that I want to check out with Harmen. The brotherhood that you bring into my life, and I want to say that also for Barry. You're two men who have enriched my life and my practice so infinitely, and this last 2 hours of conversation, the reminders I've received, the refreshments, the new boost of energy, I want to check out with gratitude.
yeah. I want to check out. Well, I noticed that my head, after 2 hours or 3 hours almost of Zoom, is sort of reaching its limit, and
Okay.
I check out with a smile, a big smile, and a deep. I'm very, very grateful for the deep connection we have, Sujith, and it reminds me that indeed, no matter the color, no matter the country, no matter the culture, no matter the race, no matter the sex, every brother is a brother, and not just a brother. It's a very dear brother, and I love all my brothers in that sense, and I love you. I love Barry. Checking out with that. And of course, I love little Raya.
Oh, oh, beautiful. Have a great afternoon. Ciao,
You
ciao.
too. Ciao, Barry. Ciao.